On today's show, the controversial Secure Communities program, which targets undocumented immigrants, was recently launched in Colorado by federal officials. Find out how this effort could end up doing more harm to victims of domestic violence. Bill O'Reilly of Fox News is labeling a group of Occupy Wall Street activists as terrorists. Their crime? Allegedly trying to provoke Fox News host Bill O'Reilly. You've got to see this video. And get a new perspective on America's financial system from a Wall Street veteran who's been there long before any occupiers. We'll take you on a journey through the eyes of Wall Street's famous 7,000-pound bronze bull. I'm Jared Jacang-Mayer. Each week, we bring you stories from the front lines of the Occupy Wall Street movement and give the microphone to you, the 99%. You're watching Occupy the Media. Thanks for joining us on Occupy the Media. Each week, we bring you up to speed on the latest news coming out of the Occupy Wall Street movement and cover the types of stories and perspectives you'll only see on Free Speech TV. We can only do this with the help of our viewers. To join the conversation, call us toll-free at 877-575-FSTV. The issue we're focusing on today, immigration. We're a nation of immigrants, but do you think the government wants to close its doors on newcomers? Give us a call. The lines are open. But first, let's get things started off with the latest headlines. In Oregon, 12 people were arrested during a protest organized by Occupy Portland. About 100 people gathered outside a post office branch to support employees at the U.S. Postal Service. As many as 35,000 postal workers could lose their jobs as a result of large-scale layoffs announced earlier this year. In Chicago, dozens were injured while protesting the recent NATO summit, and now Occupy Chicago wants the city to reimburse peaceful protesters for their medical bills. Occupiers say Chicago Police Department brutalized their bodies and minds at the NATO protests. The group returned to the streets Tuesday to demand compensation for, quote, lost income, lost stability, and treatment costs. The rally was followed up by a march to the Thompson Center and City Hall. And a victory for Occupy Los Angeles. Bank of America has returned a foreclosed home to a woman and her disabled daughter. The family lived there for over 25 years but were evicted after falling behind on payments. Dermo Rodriguez took out a second mortgage to make the house wheelchair accessible for her daughter, who suffers from cerebral palsy. And next Tuesday, June 5th, Wisconsin voters will decide whether Republican Governor Scott Walker will stay in office or get the boot. The election comes after more than 1 million people signed a petition to recall the governor. Last year, 100,000 activists protested in the state capitol after Governor Walker cut collective bargaining rights for public employees. And golf, known as a sport of leisure and affluence, is being interrupted in Michigan. The Professional Golfers Association hosted a major tournament in Benton Harbor last weekend, but some residents are taking issue with that. Caroline Briggs has the latest from Occupy the PGA.
Occupy has turned its sights on a new target: golf. Occupy Benton Harbor held a mock funeral Saturday for their community residents. They argue that the PGA acquired local land for the course illegally. Demonstrators are boycotting Mercedes-Benz and KitchenAid as they are lead sponsors of the multi-million-dollar Senior Open. 20 acres of City Park land was sold by an unelected official who was placed in Benton Harbor as part of the Michigan governor's Emergency Budget Committee. Benton Harbor residents say the manager was not democratically elected, so they feel he has no obligation to use his position to serve this community.
But we're ready to push back on him. We're going to fight back. That's what we're going to do. We're going to fight back.
For Occupy the Media, this is Caroline Briggs.
All right, that wraps up the latest headlines from the Occupy front, but let's take a minute to dig into the latest action from the Occupy movement. Sitting here in our studio today is Marcy Miranda, Free Speech TV's news producer, and Don Rojas, FSTV's executive director. How are you two doing this evening?
Doing great.
Great.
Good to see you.
I think my allergies are acting up. That headline read, was running out of breath.
Now you'll be
Okay,
fine.
so if I sneeze or anything, Marcy, just be forewarned that you might need to block it.
Oh, well,
we got your back.
Okay.
We'll get the tissues.
All right.
Don't worry.
Well, let's hash out the details on this story from Benton Harbor, Michigan. Marcy, wouldn't having a major public golf tournament in your city, as the PGA is having in Benton Harbor, wouldn't this be something that residents and officials would be cheering on? Why the big backlash over this?
Well, I mean, that's actually what the PGA says. They're asking. You know, we're bringing money into the community. What's the big deal, essentially? But the residents are actually protesting this, obviously, because they're upset at the way in which the emergency manager in Benton Harbor, who was not democratically elected, who was basically put there in place by Governor Rick Snyder, he's selling this land, this public land, and the residents there say, well, you're a public citizen just as much as we are, and you have no right to sell this land, just, you know, like we don't have any right to sell this land.
And so this has a lot more to do with just golf, Don.
Yes.
The emergency manager law is something that a lot of communities in Michigan are having imposed on them.
Right. By a Tea Party Republican governor who came to power in the last midterm elections.
And so what do you make of this protest against the PGA holding its tournament there?
Well, I think it's a legitimate protest, and I think the issues that are being raised are fundamental to the democratic process. These emergency managers, I mean, you know, to deconstruct the title in itself is an interesting exercise. But they have been appointed and given powers by the governor, powers to overrule the will of the elected representatives of the people of Benton Harbor. Now that is fundamentally undemocratic.
And so, Marcy, to wrap up real quickly, Occupy the PGA, they had this protest against this tournament, but the PGA says it's still going to be coming back 2 years from now?
Yeah, they want to return in 2014, so it'll be really interesting to see how things wrap up.
Whether or not the emergency manager has been lifted by then and the city actually gets control of its own destiny.
And just to see if residents, you know, make enough force and showing to really make a change and maybe dissuade the PGA from returning.
Well, it's certainly not good PR for the PGA. So let's move on to our next topic. Occupy Wall Street has filed a federal lawsuit against New York City, claiming authorities destroyed $47,000 worth of occupiers' books, computers, and equipment in a surprise raid last November. Marcy, we're talking about the makeshift Occupy Wall Street library that had been set up.
I think for me as a big book nerd, it was one of the more interesting parts of the Occupy Wall Street encampment, because they had dozens and dozens of books in bins, well organized. They had a full-on library that was mostly donated that was completely destroyed when the encampment was taken away
and so to get more about this lawsuit, you had done an interview with William Scott, one of the librarians of the Occupy Wall Street library. So let's watch that.
William, thank you so much for joining us today. Start us off by talking a little bit about the library itself. How did it come to grow to the significance and the magnitude that it did there at Occupy Wall Street?
Well, it really just grew organically with the occupation. People donated the books from all over the place. Visitors to the park, publishers, organizations, and it was a really central part of Zuccotti Park and Occupy Wall Street, because it signified the free exchange of ideas, learning, knowledge, and we had a huge collection of books ranging from everything from Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky to Rush Limbaugh and Snooki's autobiography, and even Bloomberg on Bloomberg.
Okay. Now, talk a little bit about the raid and what happened to the library on the night of the raid in November. Where did the books go?
Well, the riot police that cordoned off the park told us that we only had about half an hour to take everything out of the park, which was not enough time to get rid of and put in safe place the whole library that we had of about 3,600 books. So they essentially destroyed about 4/5 of the books that we had in there. We were only able to get about 1/5 of the books back. With what they did was the riot police and sanitation workers put the books into garbage compactors.
And now let's talk about the lawsuit itself. On what grounds are you hoping to, sue the city of New York, and what do you hope to get out of it in the end?
Well, we're suing them for a violation of our First Amendment constitutional right, our Fourth Amendment, and our 14th Amendment constitutional rights. And we're also asking for $47,000 in damages to pay for the books that we never got back, as well as 6 laptop computers and other materials we had. But mainly we want a public admission of that what they did was wrong, that no government should be allowed to destroy an entire library of books that the public is using.
Okay, well, William, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That was William Scott, librarian for Occupy Wall Street, and we're going to be taking calls here in a second to talk about this issue, but then also our larger theme about immigration. But I want to get both of your takes on this particular issue. So they're filing a lawsuit against the city saying you unjustly took our property, this makeshift library, and now we want you to pay us $47,000 in damages. But what I wonder is, do they actually have a case here? Because it wasn't like this was a library that they set up on their own property. It's not like they had permits to set up this makeshift library. It was on public land, and why would you expect to have those types of rights? I mean, when I park my bike on the street, I don't have, the city can still come and confiscate that if I leave it too long. Marcy?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. You know, even when you're arrested, you have personal property, and police have to respect that.
Yep.
And I think that's a large part of what the case may be. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know, but that's the argument that I would make. It's their private property, you know, and so for the police to come in and take it away without notifying them, without giving them a chance to collect their belongings, I think, you know, does fall within.
Okay, well, Don, hold that thought, because we have a caller, and we want to give our viewers a chance to weigh in. Give us a call at 877-575-FSTV. Other states are following Arizona's lead in the secure communities, and so we have a caller on the line right now, Lee from Daytona Beach, who's calling about immigration. You're on Occupy the Media.
How you doing?
Hey, we're doing great. Do you what do you want to say about immigration?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Lee, you're on Occupy the Media right now. What do you want to say about immigration?
Well, immigration, this country was founded on immigrants, okay? A bunch of people got together and said, to heck with England, we're going to create our own country and govern ourselves. I don't have a problem with anyone coming to America and wanting to try and better their lives, as long as they do it legally, just like my great-grandfather did, my wife's great-grandfather, right down the line. And when George W. Bush started letting in so many immigrants, which cost so many Americans their jobs. I was a truck driver back then.
Yep. And so, Lee, what do you think then about some of the laws that we're seeing in Arizona, Colorado, and efforts to crack down on immigration? It sounds like you're in support of these.
Yes, I am. If you're illegal, you got no business in this country. Let's not forget about the fact that 3 previous presidents, when our soldiers started coming back from different wars, legal wars, not these things they keep getting us involved in. Even Vietnam was illegal, and I was there for 2 years.
Okay. Well, Lee, we're going to be talking a lot more about immigration throughout the show, so stick around. Thanks a lot for your call. Don, we can either follow up with that, or do you want to say something about the library?
I wanted to come back to the issue of the confiscated books.
So what do you think about that? I mean, do they have a case here? Is this?
They do have a case here. They have not only a legal case, they have a moral case. I mean, this harkens back to the Middle Ages or Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia. I mean, in the 21st century, in the most democratic country in the world, you have the confiscation and destruction of books, you know, the repository of ideas. You know, this is unbelievable. And not only were their property rights violated, their constitutional rights as well, the First Amendment rights, 14th Amendment, and down the line. And
so, Marcy, you spoke with William Scott. What do they actually want out of this? What's their end goal? Are they looking for the money or what?
I think it's to make a point, you know, just to tell NYC and
NYPD,
and the city of New York as well. They don't have a right to be doing this to other people's property. They can't just come in and take things. And I think an apology more than anything. It's making a point of it and making sure that they know, you know, that it's not okay. And the other thing that I think is important to note is that, you know, they waited a while to get this lawsuit going. Obviously, the raid was in November, and we're nearly in June now. And that's because they were really waiting for that apology. They were trying to work with the city to come out and publicly say we shouldn't have done things the way we did, and it never happened. And so now they're you know, their hand was forced.
Well, and whether or not
into
there's a
legal
settlement in this case or it actually goes to trial, it'll be interesting to see where the courts say the line is drawn on when and how law enforcement and officials can come in and actually confiscate property, especially books. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break, and when we come back, find out what key traits separate those in the 99% from speaking up or distancing themselves from activists. But first, we want to hear from our social media viewers. Have you ever protested or written a letter to a company when you were dissatisfied with a product? What inspires people to stand up for themselves? Join the conversation. Post your comments online at Facebook and Twitter.
Hello, I'm Antoinette June, and this is your Occupy Update. The Occupy Denver Veteran Working Group meets every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. at the Denver Public Library. For more information and ways to get involved, please visit occupydenver.org.